Hello, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Koon, and this is the Gentleman Villain Podcast with myself and, of course, the host of your show, the Gentleman Villain himself, Mr. Regal. Mr. Regal, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Oh, just fantastic. How was your
Matt,
weekend?
as long as you're all right, then the world's all right.
You're not kidding. I just got back from vacation and drove in the
Have
door.
you? Where you been?
I went to Myrtle Beach, which is
Myrtle Beach.
lovely,
I've been there for years.
lovely little beach. Oh, you've been. So it's
yes.
I just sat in the sun and didn't get sunburned and had a good time, and came back just in time to talk to you today. So it's been a great day so far.
Lovely.
Awesome. So today, well, before we get started with that, let's talk about the goings on. Of course, we're going to be coming up to All Out soon.
Yes.
And you've got some people who are wrestling. Of course, we know recently we saw an open challenge by Claudio, and lots of stuff going on with Daniel Bryan. How are things in the BCC, Mr. Regal? Recently, we've seen Mr. Daniel Garcia might have had a change of heart.
Well, there's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on with us because we've talked about it on this show before. We are trying to do our bit to change the views of some people and younger talent. Sometimes there's things that play out on this show, but in reality, there's the fact that we understand that there's a lot of young talent and they don't get to wrestle better wrestlers or people who've been in this for a long time, because the way the job's become and the way TV is, a lot of the best wrestlers wrestle each other now. And so that's been sort of a mission of ours. And so I can't say too much at the moment, and I'm not a gossip merchant, and I'm not going to dignify anything that comes out because and nothing seems to happen around me. And I'll put it that way. I don't, there's all the, so I know that myself, John's John, and John's, that's the way he is. But I know myself, Claudio, Brian, and Wheeler are all doing our thing, and hopefully it sort of spreads and as far as trying to be the best professionals we can be, and that's all you can do, and do whatever we're tasked with. But it's to go out and we've got a great team of talent, and we want to make people have to face people in the BCC, and we're also hoping that it sets sort of standards for how to conduct yourself and different things. And this is sort of in reality just how to conduct yourself as a pro and not let's put it
what
that
to
way.
do and what not to do.
Well, yes, and it's a never-ending task, and I'm still working. I've been working on it for 39 years, and I've messed up and but it's just all to help. And in the daytime when I'm there, we're there, we're there training early, and people want to join in, and then I'm separately on my own doing things to help younger talent, and if they want, and if they don't, that's their business. And I just hope they realize that it's not all about styles. Just because I do a certain style, I've seen every style done, and I've grown up with the modern day style and been a part of it. Just because I wasn't in it, I've been a part of it since the early stages of it, and I'm all for the modernization of wrestling, and I think that's been shown with NXT and whatever
Sure.
else. And so there's a lot of things, and just I do my bit. Let's put it that way, and we'll see where that if that works or not, because there's I seem to find more and more people, which I'm very happy for, that they, I was not there this week. Depending when this episode goes out, I know people have probably wondering why I wasn't out there with any of the BCC this week. I was not there because of a family incident, not just to take care of my wife for a week. But I'll be back next week, and I was in contact with everybody, so it's just we're out to do our thing. Let's put it that way. That's about all I can say, really, because everything's in our world. Everything's good.
well, it certainly looks like it. We're all really tuned in to see what happens next, if anything, with Daniel Garcia. And you talk about different styles, and that segues perfectly into what we're talking about today, nice. which is William Regal in Japan.
Yes.
So I see what my notes say, but I'm not so sure about it. So let me ask you this: when was the first time that you wanted to go to Japan? When was the first time you saw Japanese wrestling?
So I started seeing some Japanese wrestling near the end of the 80s. We've mentioned a friend of mine, Peter Thompson, who used to wrestle as Steve Fury. He's the first person who introduced me to American wrestling. He was the first. He was in the wrestling job, but he was the person who gathered tapes and got all this stuff, because I didn't. And he'd lend me stuff. So but I'd also knew about Japanese wrestling because of the people that I was around. So once I was 17 and I was sort of out of the smaller company that I started working with, and I was still in that company in Blackpool and working loads of shows, but I was training with Marty Jones. Well, Marty was trained by Billy Robinson from being 6 years old. There's a documentary on Riley's Gym, the Snake Pit in Wigan, and which is, we're going to get to New Japan, but there's a lot of the style, and was based on, it became it's known as European wrestling, but a lot of it was called based on British wrestling, and they termed it the Lancashire style, catch as catch can, because of Billy Robinson and because of Carl Gotch, because Carl Gotch lived in England for a long time and trained at Riley's Gym, and they were very instrumental in the early parts of New Japan. And so there's a tradition there. So once I got to being around Marty, nothing but stories of the time that when he was younger, when he was there, and also seeing people that I'd grown up watching and wishing I was as good as, never got as good as, but people like Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy and Rollerball Rocco, and it seemed in the 70s there was a lot of British wrestlers, because from what I gather, Carl Gotch booked the talent, the foreign talent for New Japan. And so a lot of the fellas from the 70s that I either knew or knew about or had been to Japan. We've talked about Pete Roberts, who was the person and one of the two people I mostly based my style on once I got to a certain size, because I realized I was going to be a heavyweight. They were constantly on tour, though, and nearly all the good European heavyweights, and then what became the junior heavyweights because of Tiger Mask coming to England in 1979 as Sammy Lee, supposedly Bruce Lee's cousin, although he was Japanese. And he was an absolute sensation in England as a child. I mean, can you imagine as me getting to see him doing his incredible stuff? And what was the biggest thing in the 70s for all young kids?
Karate.
Bruce Lee movies.
Yeah, karate was huge in the 70s. For those
well,
of us
it was
old
kung
enough to
fu.
remember.
It was kung fu movies, you know, like
and the show,
right? And then the show and the kung. So Sammy Lee came and like I'm 11 and my head's blown, right? And at 10, my head had already blown with Marty and Rocco doing a different style.
Was Sammy Lee already doing like the moonsaults and the backhand springs and all that stuff?
He was doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah, there's not that much stuff that you can find on YouTube, but there is a match. I've kept this a secret from a few people, but it's time that everybody should watch this. When Sammy Lee, who became Tiger Mask, came over, he was wrestling Mark Rocco a lot. Originally, it was Marty Jones and Mark Rocco that sort of pioneered this hard-hitting style. And it this hard-hitting style. And then Sammy Lee came over and he had to keep up with them. He'd just come out of he'd come from being trained in New Japan and he'd been to Mexico. And so he came over at the time. And I think this is about right. I'd have to check with Marty, but Marty went to Mexico and he started going around. So, and then Dynamite sort of was seeing them as a young man, because he was an incredible wrestler. I used to go and watch him live regularly, and he was 16, you know. So it was like, it was like one of the bigger kids at school, and I just want to be. That's what I want to be. Obviously, never had the skill or the anything like. So I had to find my way in this job. But so Sammy Lee came over, and he had a few TV matches, but he was wrestling Rocco a lot, and they were supposed to have a match at the Royal Albert Hall, and it was a Royal Albert Hall in those days. It's the most beautiful, incredible venue. It's where the Royal London Philharmonic Orchestra play, and it's WWE have done shows from there. I've wrestled for WCW there. Wrestling used to be a big thing there. By the time I came around in the 80s, they'd stopped running it because the business wasn't as good. This is like the mid 80s. Business wasn't as good. The Queen's husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, you know, has been sat on the front row at the Royal Albert Hall of the wrestling, and it was on there for years. It was ran once a month, and it was people. The first 3 rows of people were sat in tuxedos, and then this was a big, like, wrestling. Right. British wrestling was a big thing, right? Well, the last part of, you know, it was up. I'm not sure. There's a couple of guys, John Lester and Antonio Inoki, they're on Twitter. They'll have the all the stats and that. They're great for that, and they do a wonderful job of keeping the history of everything and then sorting that out. But basically, it had stopped in the early 80s because the rent was so expensive. It's in the middle of London, but there was going to be Sammy Lee, who was Tiger, was going back to Japan to become Tiger Mask. And he was supposed to have a match with Mark Rocco on the Royal Albert Hall show. Unfortunately, I believe there was somebody in his family passed. I believe that's the story. And so it was going to be taped for television. So it never happened. He went back, and then he became Tiger Mask, and then Mark Rocco got took over as Black Tiger, and then Dynamite had already gone to Calgary as a 17-year-old. He completely changed and picked up, he took his style and his energy and gone to Calgary, and then he started going so this is all in the 80s, whereas all this really had started in the 78. It'd been going on before that. In 76, as matches of Rocco and Marty doing stuff that nobody was doing at the time, because they were trying to top each other all the time on everything.
And all this predates a lot of the stuff that we know of, that your typical wrestling fan knows, which is, where life began in 1982 at Madison Square Garden with Sayama versus Dynamite Kid.
No.
But this was put on way before them.
So there was a myth, and I remember seeing it at the time. There was a mythical match that had sort of gone by the wayside. There was one TV match of Marc Rocco against Sammy Lee. And it turned up a couple of years ago. It had been, maybe a few people have had a copy of it, and I'm sure John Lister, and he'll know the history or whatever it was. It turned up in my world a couple of years ago. My friend Peter Thompson probably had a copy of it because he's got a copy of everything, but I'd never seen it apart from when I was a child. And then it turned up. So if you want to go back and watch this match, it's on YouTube. Put Marc Rocco against Sammy Lee and watch what they're doing in 1979 and watch what, I've told you this on this podcast before, watch what Marty Jones and Marc Rocco were doing before that, and then tell me that they weren't because I know there's lucha influences and that, but not at the pace that they were doing it, and not at with the European elements of wrestling to it. So that was the start of that. So when I came along, I start, Marty's always talking about, because he was going to Japan a lot, and then different things happened and Marty stopped traveling. He stayed in England a lot because of his family, whereas Marc Rocco kept going to Japan. And there was a point where a lot of for whatever reason, I believe Karl Gotch wasn't in booking the foreigners anymore. And I know that there was, for quite a while, there was just Marc Rocco as Black Tiger and Tony Sinclair. They were going to New Japan. Pete Roberts, who was another of my heroes and I would say mentors, definitely, because I modeled a lot of the things that I do, and just being around him and he happens to be Stan Hansen's best friend. Dave Taylor was going to New Japan when he was in his very early 20s. There was a lot of European guys went to New Japan.
It seems to me that, I'm sorry for interrupting, but it just occurred to me that this tradition of this pipeline of British wrestlers to Japan continues to this very day. If you look at two of the top foreign-born people in New Japan, you've got Will Ospreay, you've got Zack Sabre Jr., and they're not the only ones. It's almost like this tradition started in the 70s and it's just held in the highest regard.
Again, there's a lot of great historians out there that they'll know when the first British wrestlers were. I think Billy first was at IWA and then moved over to New Japan. Again, I haven't got time to get into all that, and that people know far more about the actual. I'm just, because I'm living in the wrestling world, I haven't got time to be studying too much of that. Right? Sure. I'm just going off what I know. And so, like Dave Taylor was on Stan Hansen's first ever Japanese tour. That was a New Japan tour, and Dave and Stan met up whatever amount of years ago at some convention somewhere, and Dave actually, when he was there, he'd been a few times. When he was there, he had to have his appendix took out, and they did it with no anesthetic.
Oh boy,
right?
That's
so
not fun.
when Stan Hansen moved over to All Japan, Stan Hansen's best friend is Pete Roberts. So Pete moved with him. Then there was a couple of people that went to All Japan, which would have been people who Pete got in. This is in the early 80s, or getting into it a bit. And because then all there was for a while was Marty Jones, was Rollerball Rocco, which was Black Tiger, and Tony Sinclair, because they're best friends. And Tony's a fantastic wrestler, incredible wrestler, another person who helped me a lot in a lot of ways, making me a better wrestler by wrestling him.
Right.
And then I say, watch me. There's a match of me and him. It's on a Welsh TV show called Wrestle. I'm 19. I'm still trying. I've gone from being a skinny 18-year-old, I grew tall. I think we've gone through that where I grew up in my teenage years, and I'm starting to get heavier, and I'm not in the shape that I want. I'm just eating and eating to fill my frame out. And I have a match with Tony Sinclair, and he made me look. It gave me confidence and made me look a 1,000 times better than I could have done. And every time I wrestled him, he did that for me, you know. So, but that was them. Well, I was around Terry Rudge a lot, and they always talked about the New Japan thing and how great it was. And then people in Europe, Dave Morgan, who was British, but he lived in Germany, and there was so many. And like I say, Dave Taylor, a lot of the guys, the good heavyweights and junior heavyweights had gone to New Japan. And then in 1986, in fact, he could have come in 1985. Marc Rocco got into England, a young was older than me, but a young flying Fuji Amata who had just done the same thing as Sammy Lee had done in the late 70s. He'd gone through New Japan dojo, and then was Keiichi Yamada, and had gone to Mexico, and then turned up in England. And that's where, if you've listened to any of this show, I was working for one company in 1986, the Joint Promotions, which was the top promotions for many years.
That's the one that had the TV deal, right?
TV deal, yeah. But their business wasn't as good. And then All Star Wrestling, which was ran by Brian Dixon, got all, except for Marty Jones and Fit Finlay, basically got all their talent.
Right.
And then started getting some TVs. Well, New Japan asked, they always like to set the, you know, it didn't happen for a while, from Sammy Lee to Jushin Liger, but Jushin Liger turns up. And so my first ever show I quit Joint Promotions at 18 to go to work for All Star, because I know, again, we talked about that Blackpool Combat Club. I knew I needed to be around better wrestlers,
right,
to get better, right. And I quit, which you know, everybody was saying I was mad at the time, but I needed to be around better wrestlers to wrestle better wrestlers to get better, because I'd been retrained at 17 by Marty Jones, who was an incredible wrestler. But if you're not wrestling good wrestlers, no matter how much you don't get to.
So your focus at that age was to be the best that you could be? Well, like that was your primary thing. That was it.
And that's all it ever was.
Right.
I was never, I know you're supposed to want to be world champion. All I did was me. I wanted to be the best me I could, because I didn't think because I had nothing. I wished I was Dynamite Kid and people like now and Pac and Will Ospreay and people that can do all these things. I'd have loved to have done all that. I just couldn't do it. I don't have that skill set. You know, I can do it. Yeah, right. And it's just not my. So I had to, and I grew tall, and I was a heavyweight, so I could do the
Right.
heavyweight stuff.
So
And
you
I
jumped
can-
to get
I jumped. And that was where my starting, because for Brian Dixon, you worked all the time. And we all traveled, most of us, not the whole bill, but Brian would cram 8 people in a 7-seater car because he's a promoter.
right.
Right.
He's saving money.
Right.
Right.
And we all used to meet at a place called the Windmill, which is a pub on the M6 motorway highway in England. And it was the Liverpool crew, the Manchester crew, the Blackpool crew. And the Blackpool crew was mostly just me and Johnny Saint at that time. So we'd all climb in the back of car. Well, I was with Jushin Liger or Flying Fuji Amata. Well, I was still, I was shut up and do as you're told. I was still at that stage, really. I was 18 and just I got tall, but I was still skinny and I was trying to figure it out, but I was on with better people. But then, I got very friendly with him because we just did. And so if you ever want to, people years ago when Jushin Liger turned up on NXT in Brooklyn and I heard some real stupid stories about that one. And no, I just called up and asked him because we're friends since I was 18. So that was my introduction. And then until I left and moved to America, every year there was another Japanese talent come over to Britain. And if they didn't come to Britain, they went to Germany. And it depended on the size. Like Dave Taylor was in Germany and Austria with Chono and Hashimoto. I was in Germany in 1989 with Kensuke Sasaki.
So the big guys went to Germany.
Yes, because that was the heavyweight sort of place. Britain was more about, there was heavyweights, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but the good heavyweights went to Germany for the time. What the actual, at the time, New Japan's thing was, dependent on who you were, they would send you off on exertion. Not exertion. What's the word? Excursion. There we go.
I've
just had these teeth fitted in, and I'm breaking them in for me, dog.
Like Kishna just did. Right?
Yeah, that's it. Yes, excursion. There we go. I get my words mixed up sometimes. All them knocks on the head I've had. Yeah. So, and this is what happened with Liger. Come to England for a bit, go to Mexico for a bit, go to Calgary when there was any semblance of what was left with Calgary. So there was a history of Japanese wrestlers going to Calgary. Again, it was a melting pot, Calgary. I never got to go there because it was on the wane by the time I was big enough and old enough to go there. But the history of Calgary is incredible, of the melting pot and styles and different, and why you see, if you watch Brett and you watch Owen, how they do it now. If you look at it, or you look at it from my eyes, because I know I'm looking at, there's the mixture of Japanese styles, there's a mixture of European styles, there's the mixture of American styles, because it was such a melting pot and of different styles. So Liger came, and then he went in 1987, and then he went back and became. No, he didn't go back to become Liger. He went back, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really know where he went after that. I just didn't see him.
What was a young Liger like?
Unbelievable.
Fuji Amata. Was he
Flying Fuji Amata? Absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I'm 18, getting to watch. We've talked about it. The bills that I was on as an 18-year-old, wrestling better people than me, but I'm just a bit player. I've always just been a bit player in the wrestling. Yeah. But I'm getting to watch him on with Rocco every night. And then eventually, in the following year, in February of 87, Fit Finlay came to work there. So I'm watching him wrestle Fit Finlay, and I'm watching him this is a normal night for All Star Wrestling.
Right.
I put a bill out a few weeks ago. I apologize that there's a lad from New Zealand puts out stuff, and then I think it was Tony Ershaw put the bill out, and I apologize if it's John Lister or somebody put a bill out of me. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna. Sure. I want to read this out because I've kept this on my phone because it absolutely it's insanity, right? So this is the first night that we talked about this a while ago that I wrestled Fit Finlay.
The wait is almost over. A new football season is about to begin. Get ready for the NFL Week 1 action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To celebrate the return of football, DraftKings is giving new customers a can't-miss offer. Bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. Want more action for opening night? Everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. Get up 7, you win. Bet on any NFL team of your choice, and if your team leads by 7 points at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code REGAL to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code REGAL only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
We talked about this on another episode. In a small theatre in a part of Ashton-under-Lyne in Manchester. This is the bill. Now, if you know, you might not know these names, but I'm telling you, this is the everybody except for me, right? Right. So, actually, it is from Tony Ershaw because he sent it to me. Right. Your night at Ashton-under-Lyne in February '87 featured a stellar lineup. You versus Fit Finlay. So here's me at 18 on with Fit Finlay, right? Mark Rocco, which is Rollerball Rocco, versus Kung Fu, who was Eddie Hamill, who was one of the people who trained Fit Finlay and was a huge star in England and had been to Calgary and he was just a brilliant wrestler. He wrestled originally in a mask as Kung Fu because Kung Fu in the 70s was a big thing. And right. Then he got unmasked, but he is actually from Northern Ireland. Eddie Hamill, a wonderful fella. So this is the bill. Me against Fit Finlay, Rocco against Kung Fu, Johnny Saint, who world lightweight champion, versus Mike Flash Jordan, who also not long after that became world lightweight champion, who was a brilliant wrestler from Manchester. And then Flying Fuji Amata against Gaylord Steve Peacock. Steve Peacock, we've talked about it in the comedy thing. I lived with Steve Peacock when I lived at his house. He had a spare room. When I first left home at 16, he was just a pro, but he could work. You know what I mean? He knew how to wrestle. A lot of people have a lot of different things to say about him, but he was, he let me stay at his house, and he actually was one of the first people to sort of be nice to me and teach me things when I was 16, because a lot of them didn't want to, right? So, but that's just a normal bill for All-Star Wrestling at that time, and I'm 18 getting to watch that. So we've got Johnny Saint, Fit Finlay, Rollerball Rocco, Kung Fu, Jushin Liger, Mike Jordan. Unbelievable. And this is my life. And this is why I say I have a charmed life. I'm getting to watch Mark Rocco and all these people. And that's why I say, you know what I mean? If nothing else, with these younger talent, I've seen whether I can do it or not, I have seen so much and so many of top, and that bill alone, if you know if you know anything about wrestling, and you really know, that is like a stellar bill, and that's just a normal night for All-Star Wrestling. That's what I was around from a teenager. So me and Liger got on. Liger went away in 87. The next, I forget who came next because there was one thing after another. But then 1988 was the changing year for me where I started to be, I grew into a proper heavyweight. And there's the odd picture you put on this thing of me when I'm 20 years old and I look like, you know, I'm not the 19-year-old me. I'm certainly not the 18-year-old me. I'm a different cat altogether.
So there had to be like maybe a burning desire in you to go to Japan, because it's not just seeing tapes. You're seeing these guys come in. You saw Tiger Mask come in before he was Tiger Mask, and now you get on with Liger. You must at one point said, "Man, I got to get over there and see what's going on over there."
Well, the thing was, what I knew of at that time, all the tours, for the most part, all the people I'd ever talked to were 6-week tours. And I can say this now, but you know, the majority of the British fellas, I can't say what they were earning, but they were earning very good money. In fact, so good money, I hear people not earning that money anymore. Right? And this was just normal people. And I would imagine Mark Rocco was on more. And I know Dynamite was on a lot more, because I've read enough about what Dynamite was on. Mark Rocco would have been on more. But your average, if Terry Rudge went, or I know because Dave Taylor's told me how much they got paid. Once I became a heavyweight, I thought, right, I'm going to be going to Japan. It's only a matter of time before I'm going to Japan for one or the other companies, probably. But I had this thing for New Japan because of I knew so many people from there. Again, every year there was a young, and some of them came and went, and some of them stayed. Obviously, in 1989, I was in Bremen in Germany for 5 weeks with Kensuke. Kensuke Sasaki. Yes. So me and him, well, I'm 20, 21 at the time. He's on his own. I know what it's like even in the last year or so. I know what it's like to go to foreign countries and who helps you and who doesn't. So I was always, and that's continued to this day, right? I got no agenda about it. I just, are you okay? Do you need anything? Right? So I'm going forward a bit. It went on. There was one, and then it continued a little bit after I left. I know Kojima came over in 95. And then there was a lot, because Germany was still on. There was people getting sent to Germany. There was people, there was a lad called O'Hara, was around when in 92, because I only worked a couple of months in England, and then I was away. I was in Germany in Austria for 6.5 months of 92, and he was on the entire tour with us. So I was around a lot of New Japan guys. So I know I dodge all over the place, but this is just things that happened. Well, 1988. Yeah, 1988 was the changing year for me. I got booked in France. I actually got booked in for the first time in Germany in September. Early on in the year. That was going to be my German break in September. I was 20.
Of 1988.
Of 1988. In the summer of 1988, I was actually going to spend the summer in Blackpool and just work local shows, because I knew, I've been around a lot of people, and they were all telling me, like, once you start traveling, you're going to keep traveling. And I knew this was going to be the start of my traveling career for probably as much as ever. And what I thought at the time was, eventually I'll get into Japan, and if I can just get 2 tours a year, 2 6-week tours a year, that is enough money for me to live off, and everything else will be a bonus.
Yeah, I remember reading in Dynamite's book about the pay in Japan, and a tour could set you up.
Right.
Right.
So, and that was just not being Dynamite Kid. That was just being a good pro, a good heavyweight pro.
So not at the top of the card, just in the card.
Just in the card.
Right.
12 weeks a year there would have, the way I worked it out and how much everything cost and how much I could live off and my family could live off, that 12 weeks was enough for me to not only make money, but to put money away, and then everything else, and then Germany and all these other things where I was making money would have given me a good living out of wrestling.
Right.
There's a little thing to this, that in 1992, things changed for me. I had a big year away. Things in England after that, I got the call to come to America. There was a few promoters that had started running what they called tribute shows in 1990. They might have been before 1992, but because I was never in England much, it didn't affect me. Again, for the 4 years till I came to America, I was never wrestling in England very much. Right? There was a few people doing these things called tribute shows, which were basically having other wrestlers play WWE characters on shows. Wow. And I'd made a pledge that I would never, ever do one of these shows. And I never did, because I thought, I knew that I didn't know that I'd ever come to America, but I knew that I had Germany. I knew that I'd finally get into Japan. I knew that I could do, and I had other things that I could do in Blackpool with other people, with not in the wrestling world. We talked about, I think, that, I got offered the chance to open my own wrestling company. But that really, I never even gave that too much thought, because to be honest, I didn't want the stress of having to do that and dealing. I wanted to set something up that was good. The thought of it was great, of setting something up where the wrestlers got treated fairly, got paid a weekly wage, and didn't have to, things that I'd seen that I didn't like about the way promoters had treated wrestlers. But that's something else. There was other things that I could have been involved in with I have friends that in nightclub world and whatever. I could have made, I could have made enough money as a wrestler traveling, which I was anyway, making enough money traveling around to different countries. And if I needed any other work, I could have worked in doing other things. I was never going to do one of these tribute shows, because that wasn't what once I got to that point, I was around the people that had taught me to be a professional wrestler and a pro, and to act like one, and to dress like one, and to be one. And I wasn't going to do that. And then no knock on any of because I know there's plenty of my friends that ended up doing that because there was no other work for them and they had to do that. But I was not going to do that. I was absolutely refused point blank but it never even came to that, because I never had to have a yes or no. But I knew I would rather work. I'd have took a night's work in a nightclub and worked on as a doorman on a nightclub than do a tribute show, because I found that whole thing. And some of my friends made some good money out of that, and good for them. But it wasn't what I decided on. I want
to follow up with you on these tribute shows and why you don't do it. But first, we want to talk to you about Carshield. Carshield is a great sponsor of this podcast, and they make it easy and affordable to protect my car from expensive repairs. And that's just for starters. Carshield is the #1 auto protection company in the U.S. and offers protection plans for around $100 a month. The plans cover more parts than ever before, whether your car is 5,000 miles or 150,000 miles. Let me tell you how simple it is to get your car fixed. When you need a repair, you choose the mechanic, and Carshield's administrators handle the rest. That's it. You don't have to deal with the paperwork or headaches. You're taken care of. Same goes if your car breaks down and you're stuck on the side of the road. Plans through Carshield also include coast-to-coast roadside assistance. Carshield administrators are there for you with rental car options and trip reimbursement at no extra cost too. Get coverage today and you'll lock in your price and it will never go up. That means as long as you own your car, no matter how old it is, you're protected from the rising cost of parts and repairs for your vehicle. Carshield helps protect my wallet from expensive car repairs, and they'll do the same for you. Go to carshield.com/podcast to start your plan and lock in your pricing forever. That's carshield.com/podcast. A deductible may apply. As far as these,
thank you, Carshield.
Yeah, Carshield's great, and they sponsored so many of our episodes. And as far as these tribute shows,
right?
My understanding is that it's like it's kind of like the luchadors when the luchadors dress up like Kane or Undertaker.
Yes,
and
yes,
for
that's
you,
what was going on, and
it wasn't something you wanted to do. Maybe
no,
it's not.
I wouldn't have done it
to be seen. Like you don't want to be seen doing that. That especially as a young wrestler, that might get you tagged a certain way.
Well, it was what it was. It just wasn't what I was. No,
wasn't for you.
I wanted to be like Pete Roberts and Terry Rudge, and I wanted to be a international heavyweight, and that wasn't what I was going to do.
And that's not the pathway to get there.
It just wasn't what I was going to do.
Okay.
I was already traveling the world, traveling the world.
Right.
I was already part of that group of people that could do that and had a skill set to do that. And I was not going to do any of that stuff. It just wasn't happening. I could have made enough money going. Here's the bit before that. So in 1988 was when I started going abroad. In fact, the first time I ever went abroad was 1987. I went to Israel for a week with Dave Taylor. I was 19. But then as far as really traveling was the 1988. I was booked from September till October in Hamburg in Germany, which was a big break for me, the first deal. First time that I was going to Germany. And in that summer, I was going to take the summer off and, well, not take it off, just work loads of shows in Blackpool. Because, like I said, I was told by Pete and Terry and Dave, once this Germany thing kicks in for you, that's it. You're going to be on the loop, which is Germany, India, Africa, wherever they're going to need, they want traditional British heavyweights that bring credibility to, and they were all, the three of them, I've mentioned them before, they were all helpful in that respect. Also Dalibor Singh, and he will come into, I'm going to mention him now. Dalibor Singh and Ray Steele were very instrumental in that. Johnny South was very instrumental, Skull Murphy, very instrumental in getting me to be a decent heavyweight. And I apologize if there's anybody else I haven't mentioned. But those guys were all big, huge helps to me becoming a heavyweight. Mighty John Quinn, who was a Canadian, I wrestled him, and when I was like 19 and 20, and he helped me to up my skill set. So I get back from Germany, and then I'm doing a few shows in England until for the next couple of months. I get a call in the early March of 1989. I'm already booked at this point for 2 stints in Germany this year, which is Hamburg. This is early 89. I'm booked in Hamburg in September through October, and then I'm booked in Bremen, which was for CWA, which was the big Otto Vance's company, Peter Williams, sorry, not Williams. And they'd already booked me from the previous Hamburg thing. You see, once I got my foot in the door there, I was booked for the next year already on 2 lots of Germany, which is, that's how it sort of you start your word of mouth and your ability and people being nice enough to get me through things and teach me things and whatever else. So I get a call out the blue it was either late February of 89 or beginning of March from Tiger Dalabar Singh. I'd wrestled him quite a bit in the last year or so, whenever I'd wrestled especially for a company called Rail Wisco and Green, which were part of joint promotions and was ran by a lovely lady called Anne Rail Wisco, who happened to end up marrying Sheik Adnan El Casey. And then he just buggered off and left her. He came over to England to wrestle for a little while, and then he married Anne, and then disappeared on her.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, but she was a lovely lady. And he calls me, and he's in South Africa, and he said, "Darren, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm booked up in the end of the, Germany and whatever and that." And he said, "Can you be on a plane to South Africa tomorrow with a great friend of mine, Jason Singh, Kashmir Singh?" I suppose I can tell this story now. They'd had the Iron Sheik there. Tiger Dalabar Singh is from Leeds in England. He was a huge star with the Indian community. A lot of the South African population is Indians. There's a lot of Indian people live there, and they love wrestling. And so Dalabar Singh from England, Gamma Singh from Calgary, Tiger Jeet Singh from Toronto, they were all big stars in South Africa. And I get a call. The Iron Sheik's been here and caused havoc. I'm not going to say any more than that, but it caused havoc.
Well,
and I was get on good with Sheik, so I don't know what his version of it is, and it's not my story to tell. But can you call whoever you're working for and ask them if they'll let you go? And it was Brian Dixon again, who's Brian's. Everybody's got a story about Brian, but Brian was always right with me, always right with me. He did nothing but do right by me, and never done all these things I've heard. He's always, my career wouldn't be what it was without a lot of what Brian Dixon did for me at different times. And he said, and I called Brian, I said, "Brian, I'm booked for you for this month." I said, I'm going, Gil Singh's just called me and asked me to go to South Africa and be there for 2 days' time to start wrestling, leave tomorrow and fly over there. He said, "Of course you can." So
he wasn't the kind of promoter who would be territorial about exclusivity or that kind of thing.
It might have been if it was
some of the top
Rocco, yeah.
Okay,
but
gotcha.
I'm
you're young.
I'm
new,
young, and I'm 20, and he knew. Again, things that Brian always told me. Once I got to a certain age, he used to always say yeah, you're going to be a heavyweight and you're going to do that. And he knew what good heavyweights did. They traveled, right? So he was never,
sure.
For whatever I hear all these other stories, with me, he saw somebody who was ambitious, who trained, who dressed. I always turned up. When I was 18, I didn't know so much. Once I was 19 and hanging around the right people and at the heavyweights, I always turned up with a decent shirt on and a looking the part. And it's just one of those things, like, Darren, go and do your thing. So it was actually turned into a bit of a story, but me and Kashmir Singh left to go to to South Africa, got to London. All the planes were cancelled through fog. So instead of a direct flight from Heathrow or Gatwick, wherever it was in London, to Durban, well, no, to Johannesburg and then to Durban, we ended up having to stay the night with, luckily, Kashmir Singh had relatives in London, near, I think it was Gatwick Airport, actually, that we stayed with them. The next day we had to fly to France, then to Portugal, then Portugal to Mombasa, because the planes had got cancelled. We landed in Durban. The promoter was there, grabbed us, stuck us in a car, and drove us across like a couple of hours to Pietermaritzburg. So the half a day off rest that we should have had wasn't half a day off rest that we had. We got right there, and again, these are tales for another time, but we had a match that night and I nearly got stabbed. Somebody came through the ropes with a big knife and tried to stab me, and that's another time for another night, right, or another day. And I'm 20.
Right, right.
But people took the wrestling seriously in these places, and it's hard for anybody to understand that if you haven't come from that world. And when you hear us, all wrestlers saying these things, oh, that's it. I was wrestling Tiger Dalabar Singh and Kashmir Singh, right? And it's full of rabid Indian wrestling fans who love wrestling, and these are their superstars, and I'm beating up on them at 20, right? And they're right on the ring. There's no security. It's just it was what it was.
Serious
right?
stuff.
Serious stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But that's neither here nor there. I get back from South Africa after a month, and I forget what bookings I had, but I had about a month where I was in England, so back to work for Brian Dixon, and I had to meet at Birkenhead for some reason, which is the only time I've ever been to Birkenhead. Brian Dixon's office is in Birkenhead. Only time I ever had to go there was for some reason I had to meet him there. And when I got there to the meet, this will be what, April of 89 now, or the end of March. It's around about that time of 89. Who walks in to it's not walking, I'm just waiting at this outside Birkenhead train station, is Jushin Liger when he was still Fuji Amata, or Keiichi Amada when it was in Japan, and Masa Funaki, who became UWF Funaki. That's the guy who was originally sealed down to be Jushin Liger. They'd sent them for their last excursion. They'd sent them back to England for a bit, and then they were going back to do whatever. And then the history with it was originally, the Liger character was for Funaki. It ended up being with Keiichi Amada. So I got to meet them. And as we're waiting for Brian, Liger, again, he's seen the skinny 6'3", 18-year-old me 2 years ago. He hasn't seen, and now I'm the 20-year-old that's 17 stone and fit as a butcher's dog, and we're having a chat because we're friends from a few years ago. And I remember seeing Funaki and just like being in awe of him, because he was, I don't know if he's definitely my size, height wise, but just like a movie star, absolute movie. I just had an awesome presence about him. It's just an hard thing to explain that, but just there's times when you see people and you just go, well, they're just wanting just magic. There's something about him. And when I see pictures of him now, and he's older, I think he's a couple of years older than me. He just, or we're about the same age. I mean, it just still looks incredible. It's just, and it was like me seeing a movie star. I was just like, wow. And it was just lovely to see him. And they started talking to me. And while we were waiting for this, because Brian was always sometimes a bit late, they said, oh, and Liger was talking to Funaki, and he said, oh, well, we'll talk about when we get back. We're going to get you over to Japan. So that was my first initial thing about going to Japan.
That was it. It was just someone saying, we're going to get him over.
We're going to get him over. So this is where it goes a bit pear-shaped. It doesn't matter what happened. I didn't end up going to New Japan until I was already in America.
Right.
So what happened was, New Japan used to do, and I don't know, but everything was very one-to-one. There's no phone calls, no anything. And I know this very well. See, I know a lot about the way my roots go very deep with New Japan. Let's put it that way, and we'll get further into this as we go. All right. There used to be a man called Joe Diego, Tokyo Joe, who lived in Calgary. And whenever there was any instructions to be given to any of the talent that were either in England or in Germany, and I was there with all of them from 1986 until 1992, when I came to America, there was always somebody from New Japan I was around. I was with young guys. They would send Joe from Calgary to either England or Germany and bring them letters of whatever training they had to do or whatever it was. I had no idea what it, but Joe would hand deliver the letters and stay for a few days, a week or whatever, and he'd be there. And he was very well respected, obviously, by the company for him to do that. Here's one story. This was a mad thing. So in 1989, I was in Bremen in Germany, and we did 5 weeks. The night before the last night, they filmed some stuff for you. There was a new cable company. Cable was very hardly existed in Europe, but there was a company called Screen Sport, and in all these different European countries. And I wrestled on quite a few of their shows. We used to do them in France, but they ended up coming to Bremen and interviewing us. And I had to actually do an interview. That's out there, but I can't imagine how bad that would be. Because I was wrestling Colonel Brody, and I'd wrestled, and I used to train with Sasaki every day. That was another thing, because I was always I trained with all these fellas as well, you know. Because in 2000, 2000. In 1989, for that month, whenever we'd get to the building, me, Funaki, and Fuji Amata, who became not long after Jushin Liger, we'd do squats together, and we'd do we'd train together as soon as we got to the building, and then they'd wrestle and I'd wrestle, and then we'd drive back together. So for a month or so, or whatever it was, it could have been a couple of months, I'm not quite sure at the time, we were on shows together. And so that's how, and it just reinforced mine and Liger's friendship, and I got to know Funaki. One night, there was something happens. Again, I'm skipping it backwards and forwards, but these little things that pop into my head. One night, there was a match in Croydon. Robbie Brookside tells this story very well. And it was Funaki and Liger, or Keiichi Yamada at the time, on with, I'm not going to say who, because that's not my thing, but two fellas. One of the fellas was a wonderful fella from Ireland. The other one was a bit hard work. A big, heavy fella. And I believe he's become one of these fellas who's created this, and he started getting a bit, I'd know on Facebook, but people unfortunately tell me this, he's started to get a bit whatever on Facebook, and it's none of my business. I don't care. And that's why I don't want to say his name, but whatever that, I'd not long come out the ring. I'd watched the match and I thought, this looks like it's kicking off a bit. But, Lucky Gordon, I said his name now. Lucky Gordon was the Irish fella. Lucky Gordon was a good fella, and there was no problems with him, but they had problems with the other fella. Not two fellas, especially Funaki, not two fellas to be trying to think you can take any kind of liberties with.
Right. Wrong guys to do that with.
Wrong, especially Funaki, right? Don't be, and Liger. I mean, they're not, they're a different guy. And, like 20 odd year olds and they've come through a completely different, whatever I've come through, they've come through a really hard system, right? A punishing system. I just did that to me, whatever I did is whatever I did, and I trained like them, but they had to train like that. I mean, I did that because I wanted to, they had to. So all of a sudden, I just go back into because it was on the dressing rooms were upstairs, and I go back into the dressing room because the intermissions come in it. Next thing I see, the two that they were on with come running through, and Liger and Funaki just charge. I mean, just screaming after them, and they've bolted like it. And Billy Gordon was a absolute gentleman and a wonderful fella and lovely, and he could handle himself. He wasn't. But it was get out the way because they were kicking off. Anyway, yeah. That's that. So that's how I got to know them. They'd asked me to go to Japan. I get back to this Eurosport thing. So we had to do these interviews, but it was like with 12 different European countries and all 12 different promos with somebody from France, somebody from Spain, somebody from Italy. For Kensuke Sasaki, his promo consisted of Tokyo Joe Diego, having a baseball bat and him stood there, having to stand there with his hands behind his back and his chin up, while Joe smashed him as hard as he could on the chest with a baseball bat and talked in Japanese. And I mean, smashed him.
Wow.
So it was probably half a dozen times each promo, and there was 12 of them to do. By the end of it, and Sasaki just, he's not allowed to say or do anything because he's still considered Japanese young boy, right? Right. He's a big, strong fella, but he's just, but I'm just like that. And I mean, as hard as he could hit him, just smashing him across the chest. There might be somebody who can find some of this out there on YouTube because it definitely exists. But he had to do it 12 times. And then there was like just welts and welts and welts. And he just, but I'm watching from the back. And after about the third or fourth interview, nothing was moving above camera level. But his knees were starting to shake. There was nothing on it, just completely stone-faced. So these are things that I've just witnessed that, like, just people, it's like you're making stuff up, right? But 12 different promos and 12 times getting smashed the hell out of with a wooden baseball bat across the chest to show how tough he was.
Jeez.
That was his promo. That was
Right.
it. He just stood there. Now, me and him got on for the 5 weeks. Me and him trained together. You know, we didn't have a great, we could get by with the language, whatever, but we were together for 5 weeks because we were both in the early 20s. So I bonded a friendship with him, and there's a lot of the stories about him where a lot of people that I know, friends of mine in Japan, who they don't get on. It's none of my business. I get on with a lot of people who don't get on with each other. If that makes any sense.
Sure.
As long as you don't do it, I don't get in it's none of my business. Leave me out of it. You do it. If you don't get on, that's as long as we get on. Me and him had a bond because we spent 5 weeks together and we trained together and we laughed a lot, and we went out a lot and made the most of our time in Germany. So we've always stayed friends. In fact, he came to a WWE show in Japan and brought his sons. I think there's even a picture of me, him, and CM Punk at one point, because he came to see me and he was like, you know, he's got this image of whatever, but when he sees me, he's just all happy and hugging me and that, because, again, as I've always done, I knew went from a kid who treated me right, who didn't, and I always made sure he was okay for the 5 weeks, because a lot of the other fellas didn't care. So that was one of the continuation of me just being around New Japan guys. I found out later on, because of we talked about why Joe Diego used to come over. Somebody had, and I can't really go into this story, but somebody had said, "Oh, I'm going to New Japan soon," because he'd overheard the conversation of me and Liger at 20. Give me your information, and I'll take it for you. So me not knowing any better at 20, I gave this person which was all it was in those days, was an 8x10 black and white photo with your resume. I gave it to them. A few years later, I never heard anything from New Japan from then onwards. A few years later, I happened to be in Brian Dixon's other car. Brian Dixon had 2 cars, one a 4-seater Citroen and one a 7-seater Citroen. And Frank Cullen, Chick Cullen, who was always very helpful to me, I've mentioned him before on this show. Frank Cullen happened to get in the back seat, and there was the luggage, the magazine rack, and he was just being a bit nosy, I think, and he pulled it out, and he pulled out. This was a couple of years later. He pulled out my stuff. So the person who I trusted to take my stuff to Japan had just binned it. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but Finlay had the same thing happen to him. In 1991, this is on record, Finlay went to the junior tournament. When he got there, they said to him, "Where have you been for the last 5 years? We've been trying to get out. We've been sending messages through this certain person to get to you." That was the protective nature, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not going to go any deeper, but people looked after their own spots or looked after the friends.
Right. It was sabotage.
You said it.
Right.
So I should have really gone. I was down to going when I was 20, and I just didn't. But it didn't matter, because I was I was working constantly.
And things happen as they should, you know.
As they should.
Right.
So I have and the person who did it, I have absolutely no. I totally get it. I wouldn't do it. It's one of those things. Right. You know, we've done this, but if you've got to look after your spot, and you've got a 20-year-old, if you're of a certain age, and then there's a 20-year-old coming along that may take your spot, and you're relying on that money, maybe Does that make sense?
It does. You're being very forgiving of someone you probably respect.
Respect, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's just the way the job was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and I've basically told you the tale. There used to be a lot of British wrestlers go to New Japan, and then some got in, and then a lot didn't, and
some were never heard of. Some New Japan never knew about. They never heard your name. Yeah,
right. So let's leave it there.
Sure.
Right.
So the first
next
time you
thing
went to New Japan was
when I was in America.
Right?
So let's skip forward now. So you can see where my roots lie with New Japan.
Well, before we do, Mr. Regal, let's talk about something else real quick.
Ooh.
Yeah, is right, because I was on vacation. I did get use a sunscreen, so I wasn't able to find out if it's true that this item can help you with your sunburn. But it's time to talk about a BlueChew. Of course, it is summertime. It's time to bring that summer heat into the bedroom, and temperatures aren't the only thing that's rising this summer, Mr. Regal. That's right. This episode is sponsored by BlueChew, and as you know, confidence can take you far in life. It can help in the bedroom for sure. People love some confidence, especially when it comes time to step up to the plate. That's a baseball reference, Mr. Regal. I'm not sure.
Right. No,
or step on the pitch. That's where BlueChew comes in. BlueChew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets, because who wants to be bothered with all that swallowing when you can just chew it
at a fraction, lovely bubbles with them as well.
At a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime. That's good. Day or night. You can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is simple. Just go to BlueChew.com. Consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and as soon as you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy, none of that, Mr. Regal.
No,
we can't have
and
that.
Now I'm getting to my age, it's probably, as well as all those other wonderful benefits, because let's face facts, I'm 54 now, so I just pop the odd one in because it saves me peeing on my shoes,
It's just a matter of gravity, really.
Yes.
It's just, so if you don't want to pee on your shoes, that is one reason that you'd be excited to see the postman, because when your package has arrived, and, women, very different from men. I've never seen a man
I think my postman's been robbing mine.
You think so?
Yeah.
Is there a way you can tell?
Well, here we go. Right. So the wife sends me over the road the other day. Right.
Sure.
To just ask for the neighbor if I could. Well, unbelievable. I knock on the door, no answer. I should, but I know. I look through the front window. This lady, you're gonna have to censor this, but this lady, the postman's there, right?
Sure.
The UPS fella's there, right? They're all. So I think they've been having my BlueChew, right? But all of them, they're all at it. They're all at it, right? The gardener and the pool boy, they're all around it at it. And I come back and I told the wife, I was shocked, and she went, "Oh," she said, "she's a lucky cow. She's just as good at bunko. She gets all the luck." So it's just one of them things.
So you better watch those packages while they watch your package. And there's nothing sexier than confidence. And BlueChew can help give you confidence, or your gardener confidence, or your UPS man confidence, or your mailman confidence.
Yes.
Whoever gets a hold of this package. So if you or anybody could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, BlueChew can help. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code GENTLEMAN at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code GENTLEMAN. I say gentleman because gentleman can be spelled, gentleman. To receive your first month free, plus being gentle takes you a long way. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring the podcast. Mr. Regal, we had just talked about how, you had an opportunity maybe to go, but it didn't happen. And like we said, things happen for a reason.
Yes, they do. So let's get to the
now you're in WCW.
So
right, you're in WCW.
Right. So I'm in WCW. I've had the great fortune to come, and I've had an incredible year. And then I get the message that I am being asked to wrestle the legendary Mr. Antonio Inoki, head of New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time. And it was on his final countdown. Some people have said it's the seventh on his final countdown. It is actually an added match on his final countdown, because he was slowly retiring. Now it's where the stories start. So why pick me? Well, Mr. Inoki picked me specifically because if you know anything about the history and his history, and you know the legend, and you see the way that his final matches happened, back to that, a big thing in Japanese mythology of pro wrestling is the Lancashire style, catch as catch can. Now, I don't claim to be anything any more than me knowing enough stuff. I'm no expert at anything. I can just that my style is based. The European style is that. So I'm never, I know enough that I know because I've been around the right people to teach me, but I don't claim to be any kind of expert on that. But I was the only one doing that style on a nationwide basis or a worldwide basis, because of WCW, really, and not the only one. I know that sounds silly, but as far as WCW, I was.
Sure, and that is a powerful organization that has TV all around the world.
Right.
So what you're saying is that style of wrestling being broadcast all around the world was almost exclusive to what you were doing at the time.
Well, yes, I was the one doing that. I purposely kept my style as much as possible. If Billy Robinson would have been able to wrestle Mr. Inoki, I'm sure Mr. Inoki would have wrestled Billy Robinson and beat him. It was a specific set of matches to different people from different styles of wrestling. And so that's why I know this, because I've been told this directly. Other people might have other stories or have made stories up. I know this as a fact. And it was also that he wanted to beat in a non-title match, a WCW champion. Well, I was both. I covered two parts of that. I was the world television champion, and I was the person doing the Lancashire style, which is somewhat mythical as far as me. It's just the style that I do, and it is based on that. So I get told that I've got to do this match with Mr. Inoki, and I'm blown away because, first of all, I'm 26, right? Antonio Inoki, whatever, it's this day and age, and people don't the everything's there for you to know, and that is there's a huge mystique around Mr. Inoki and the myth and the legend and all that goes with it. But he's also a man who's fought Muhammad Ali. And as a child growing up in England, Muhammad Ali was one of my heroes. Muhammad Ali spent a lot of time in England growing up, when I was growing up, because although he was vilified in this country, in America, that's not for me to get into. In England, he was loved. He could come and fought in America because he made more money, but he was on chat shows all the time. He was beloved. I had a Muhammad Ali action figure that you could pull things in it, boxed, and it had its own ring, and he did it like a friend of my dad's had a car, a big like expensive car sales showroom, and Muhammad Ali opened it. He did a lot of work in the 70s in England. Well, it was a huge star, and to me, it was like Evel Knievel.
Right.
There were certain things that crossed over to Britain or were just Evel Knievel was whatever whatever he was to you, he was just as much to me and Muhammad Ali as a child. So that I had Evel Knievel, the wind up. Anybody remembers those wind up things?
The thing with the string.
And
I had one myself. Yeah.
Right. So Muhammad Ali. So I'm like, wow. And then I get told that, right, I knew that there was a deal going on, and Eric Bischoff. I actually asked him the other day because I called him and asked him to make sure that my side of this is right. But they had a working agreement. Well, from what I know from the Japanese side is that was part of the deal that he wanted to do. It was because they're sending people over to give them an excursion so they could come to do, but talent trade as well. But he picked me. He picked me, and so I went to Japan for the first time a couple of weeks before. I did an angle with him where I wrestled Johnny B. Bad. I'm going to tell this story. We used to do, which was, again, these things, even to this day, it's weird, but because that's the way I was brought up in wrestling. We used to do promos. So many, Mr. Shivani was part of it as well. So many market-specific promos, or promos weeks ahead. When I first came to this country and they started doing those Disney tapings where there was 13 weeks ahead. It was like sticking a knife through everything that I'd been taught about protecting the strength of this job. Right? We've talked about it, and still some, when you've had that hammered into you from being a teenager and by the people,
right?
It's just so there's certain things I'm just not comfortable talking about, but this is what happened. We're doing promos, and Marc Mero came into me and said, "Can I have the television championship, please?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I'm beating you for it at the next whatever that was when I did the angle with Mr. Inoki." Now, Ric Flair was in charge of the creative at the time, as people call it, the booking right. At the time. He didn't know about this deal with Mr. Inoki, right? So I had to say to Marc Mero politely, sorry, you better get somebody to go and talk to Eric, because I knew about this deal, but again,
Mum's the word.
mum's a word.
Right.
No, nobody else seemed to. So I had to say no. And he wasn't too happy with that. But he went away, and eventually they came back. And I forget exactly whether Rick was there or not. But Eric had told it that, because where we did promos, which was down at the bottom of the CNN Centre, you had to cross over the courtyard inside the CNN Centre and go on the South Tower, and WCW was on, I believe, the 12th floor. And so somebody went across, whoever it was, and talked to Eric, and Eric said, no, Regal can't lose at this. Can't really tell you why, or maybe they did tell him why, but he can't lose. He's got to do this thing with an oath. So, you know, Mark might not even remember all this, but I do, because again, once I knew this was an important thing for me going on. So there was a bit of a, whether he remembers this or not, there was a bit of a friction thing with he just seemed very often. He used to live above me in an apartment, and I was always helpful to him and helped him out, you know, always got on well with him, and always, like, you know, I wrestled him, and you know, I always tried to do different stuff with him to make him look like a better wrestler, and more than what he was capable of. Because he did, and to do different stuff, because again, I'm trying to keep my style different than everybody else, otherwise they just blend in with everybody else. There's people have brought that up over the years of why you should have changed. No, if I'd have done that, I'd have just been another wrestler. That's why I stayed around for 30 years, because even when I didn't do that style, I had the thing of I could change into doing anything at any time, and I could do lots of things, but I kept a little, whatever it was, that European stuff that I'd been passed on and taught how to do properly. And so I have this match with Marc Mero, and on the front row is Mr. Inoki, and he was in the Japanese Senate at the time, the Diet, as it is called. And it's all the security. I mean, this is like the FBI, or what, Japanese version of the FBI. So I've said to Marc Mero, look, I know you, and if Mark is, he said, please don't, because he's a very nice fella. But, you know, sometimes when you don't know what's going on, or if you know,
sure,
I just know, I knew what was going on. He might not have even known that. He might have heard the name Antonio, but he wouldn't have known what I know about Antonio Inoki.
Right.
And he wouldn't have known the history of New Japan, and he wouldn't have, it just did. Right. But I did. And I had this, I don't know, understanding of the culture and the respect and the whatever else. I said, I've got to do this angle with Mr. Inoki at the end of this. But I could see that he had the ump a little bit. He wasn't happy. And I said to him, I know I've got to do this match, and then at the end of it, he's going to come in the ring and it's going to be what it is. Do not fire that glitter gun off into the ring. Well, the first thing he does is get on the corner and fires a glitter gun. And so there's all these big silver things all over the ring. Right. So if you actually go back and watch that match, first bump I take, I stand up and I'm covered in all these stupid things. I look like somebody from Studio 54 in 1975 or something, you know, with all these like things all over.
Yeah.
Right.
All the confetti.
Right. But it's big, these big silver things huge, all over me. And, yeah. I'm like, and then I'm doing this thing with Mr. Inoki. So I go to Japan then for 10 days. And I get as much as I'm going to say, I got looked after very well. Let's put it that way. And I wrestled. The first night there was incredible because I got to wrestle people again, because I'd watched tapes and I'd read up on New Japan, and I knew what I knew, and I knew people from there, and I knew people who had wrestled and trained, and that goes back to Marty and Marty Jones and Terry Rudge and Pete Roberts and that. And the first night I got to wrestle Kido and Fujinami, who were people that I knew were pros, real, the top, right? Fujinami, incredible. So was Kido. And you know, I beat Kido. I beat quite a few people on that tour, or I didn't get beat. I was in some tag matches, but I didn't get beat because I've got this match with Mr. Inoki in America when I get back.
Right.
Right. And so, and from then ever onwards for the next 3 years, I was going on regularly on tours for the next 3 years. I always got looked after very, very well by everybody there. And it was some of the just great times of my life. And again, I knew a lot of people there. So the first day that I get to Japan, this is before my match with Mr. Inoki, the first day, Mr. Inoki comes over to me. I'm at the building early, and I'm doing my squats and doing my stuff, what I do anyway. And there's the group of young boys by the ring training. And Mr. Inoki brings over Yuji Nagata, Otani, and Ishizawa, who became Kendo Kassin. And he asked me, although we're all the same age near enough, he asked me, he said, every tour, so all of a sudden, this is a sentence, he said, every tour you're on from now on, that, right, which is, wow,
From now on. That's
which
good.
is what is exactly what he said to me.
Right.
He said, I want you to train with these three, because business in England by then wasn't. 94 had been a bad year. 95 came back a little bit in England. That's when I believe Kojima went, and then a few others after. It sort of, there was some, you know, little ups and downs, but they were three that didn't get to go to England, and he liked a lot of because a lot of it was based, whether they needed or ever used that style, he liked them to be or to know it, right? It's no different than when I first met Triple H. When I found somebody who wanted to actually train, I'd been given all this European stuff.
You're happy to share it with anybody.
I'm happy to share it with anybody. But this was a direct order from Mr. Inoki.
Sure.
That's why I'm very close with the three of those people. So my roots, and anybody that's come after them who's been either mentored by them or wrestled them. There's a lot of people don't know how far or deep my roots go with New Japan. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Because we are very close friends. It's not like we have great conversations. We don't have to. We can just, and nor do we. But the three of them, and we just sit and we just, with each other, there's a bond,
right.
A special bond between us. And two of them went in a different direction, different companies. But Nagata stayed where he is, and we still communicate and communicate with all three. And there's things that people know that are, you know, different things that are obvious, but they have no idea how much of a bond that the four of us have together.
Wow.
Because every single time I was there, I'd be in the ring with them and showing them that style. and whether they used it or not, and different, it doesn't matter. That was my job, was to train, and we all trained together, and we hung out together, and and they were still young boys at the time, you know, and they were old as me, but that was so. When I hear these people talk about they have deep roots with people, mine go back very deep, right? Although there's the stuff I did in Japan, but you know, if you don't know any better, or if you're not a Japanese historian, and I know Fumi Saito knows that the score here, but I'm just a pro wrestler. But in Japan, I have, because I've wrestled Mr. Inoki, and I'm not, you know, I don't get mentioned, but there's a thing with me there because of the people that I was, you know, I helped, and still keep in touch with, and and again, it's a mythical thing, really, but it's the Billy Robinson thing. If you look at the lineage, it's Billy Robinson, Marty Jones, me. All these things add to this myth, and these different things. You know, these other little things, and these might not be interesting to a lot of people, but they're important things. I've talked about how New Japan used to do business. Brad Reagans is somebody that they trusted immensely. Me and Brad are good friends, and they trusted Brad Reagans. Was very close to Masa Saito. And so when Brad because everything is letters and handed over and no phone calls, when Brad wasn't there and he couldn't bring stuff back to Eric Bischoff, Mr. Inoki or Mr. Sakaguchi, who was the president, I believe, at the time, used to give them to me. Used to give me letters, and I used to land in Atlanta, and the next day, or if it was possible, I would take them and give them to Eric Bischoff. That's how much they trusted me.
Wow.
Which is, again, if you don't know that culture, I'll leave it at that.
Big deal.
It is a big deal to be trusted with that. And they used to trust me to give from my early time there ever. That's why I called Eric the other day, because and I asked him, you know, because he had so much going on, but this is 94, 95. This is pre-Nitro. This is all that other stuff and all that, whatever he's got thinking about. This New Japan thing was a deal at the time, and it was, you know, there was people going backwards and forwards. This was before the NWO and before this is all these things that I was basically on every other tour. And sometimes, I mean, there was the time when I went in, you know, I was the first British person to have an IWGP Heavyweight Championship match against Hashimoto.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing, because in those, you know, that group of fellas in those days were, how can I put this? The popularity then was, and the mythical whatever. There was Chono and Muta and Hashimoto, and you know, this is
it's a rarefied air. This is
right.
Yeah.
Well, to the point of in 97, I was put on and which was an unusual thing at the time, and was put on the New Japan team. There's a picture of me and Sasaki, Sasaki, Muta, and not Chano, because Chano was on the other team. I feel terrible. I can't remember. He's not so good. But anyway, there's a photo out there, and you'll see I was part of that. And some people might go, "Oh, that's something," but I know different, because I know the culture there, and I know the way they are, and I know different things, and things that a lot of people, and things that I would never share, and that's why they trust me. You know, that or they did. I don't know the new people. I still have all my friends there that work there that I've known for, or have whatever, and I can get whatever because of deep-rooted, very, very deep-rooted, close relationships with people. And so that's that. So there's another thing. So the Regal Stretch, let's come up with that. So I had to win on my first night in Japan and beat Kido. And they said we want like a submission. So between myself, again, and this is hard for me to say sometimes because I don't want to give, they still very much in that old mindset of mine. But myself, Kido, and Fujinami came up with that submission on the shower room floor less than 10 minutes before we went out to do the match.
Wow.
Because we were just thinking of things, and again, another thing with me, as soon as I walk in, I remember Fujiwara was on that tour. And he spoke really good English. I don't know. And again, I'm saying stuff here that they all talk to me in very good or decent English, whereas they wouldn't talk to the Americans in decent English.
Right.
I found that a lot. And I asked one day, and this, I know, but I asked one day somebody of the older generation why. And they said that the Japanese always considered themselves the British of Asia, because they based their naval strategies on the British, and they were a little island that went out and conquered their part of the world. And so they used to be very different around me than they were I used to notice a lot with a lot of the Americans. They were very, very different around me. I have to say one person was on my mind now. The entire time I was there, the incredible and wonderful Black Cat, Victor Ma, who was a Mexican luchador, went to Japan and ended up being the head of the trainer at the dojo there, and trained Chris Benoit and Scorpio and people. He looked after me, and because he was very well connected with Mr. Inoki. Mr. Inoki, like every single night, every night he took me out and took me to places that I would never have gone to otherwise. In the sumo, I went to the place where the sumo guys train and ate with them. I ate Kobe beef when it was a big deal, and this was 1994, when it was $500 for a tiny piece. And I got to go and eat stuff. I do things that people didn't get to do because of Mr. Inoki giving me the okay on things, or making sure that I was always okay and looked after. And there was a lot of things that I can go into, but I won't, of things of that nature, right? So I got to so Black Cat, I have to mention him because he's no longer with us, and he was so wonderful to me, and took care of me. But I had a lot of things, and I have to mention Tiger Hattori, always incredible to me. Everybody there was. Shibata's dad was a referee when I was there, and you know, and then I know a lot of the Japanese guys don't like him because for whatever, but Peter Takahashi, I believe his name was, he spoke perfect English. That's not my story to tell why he fell out with him, but he spoke, he was helped me, you know, like he'd make sure I could always. But when I got there on that first tour, as soon as Fujinami, Fujiwara, and Kido found out that I not only had trained with Marty, but was friends with Pete Roberts, they couldn't do enough for me. Because they'd all trained as young, that when Marty was going there, they were all trained together, because Marty always trained with them, and Pete was so well respected, you know, Pete's so well respected. There's a fantastic match to find if you want to see what the style of being a pro that I came to America and became a character. But there's a match of Tiger Mask and Fujinami against Black Tiger and Pete Roberts. And watch when Pete Roberts and Fujinami get in the ring together. It's like, that's the pro that I wanted to be. It's just black trunks, black boots, get in there, and just so good that it's unbelievable. And then they tag out and Mark and Black Tiger and Tiger Mask get in and do their incredible stuff. But it's just, that was my life,
right,
and my people. So the door's opening for me again. Why do I do what I do, and why am I doing this? And yes, this is waffled on a lot, but there's all lessons to be learned here of how you treat people. Because I was treated, I'd have done it anyway, but because I was treated by Pete Roberts and Terry Rudge and Marty and people, and then I treated other people like that, and I've gone on doing it, and it's led to whatever I've got, because I was never, didn't care about being a star. I wanted to be a good pro wrestler. You know, there's people, sometimes I've heard this thing and they throw these wrestling terms about, and you just, sorry, there's no other way. I just want to go, it's when they go like, oh, he's a mid-carder. Right. Oh, I hate that term, because everybody's got a place on the card, but it's said with anytime anybody says it, they seem to say it with a demeaning thing. Yeah. Like, to me, another word I detest, and everybody should, we've talked about why I don't like the word mark, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anybody who calls somebody a jobber needs to check themselves in the mirror on the same scale as calling somebody a mark. Mm. That word needs to go right out the window. These are people that are willing to put you up. You cannot get put over if people, but it's not, you know, like people will say it, but they don't say it. It shouldn't be said. It's it's demeaning. It's demeaning. It's a demeaning. The way it's said is so demeaning to people. And all these people who write about wrestling, they all should check themselves in the mirror, because they might say, "Oh, you shouldn't say mark," but they'll still call people jobbers. Right. Don't do it. It's a horrible term to call somebody who's willing to help further your career, because that's what basically anybody who's willing to put you over is doing, is help further your career. Should be cherishing these people, not talking bad about them. What's the matter with these people, right? So like mid-cut, no, I don't. If you want to call me I don't even consider myself that. I don't. Well, I'm just me. What I am is a professional wrestler, right? And when I was a sports, when I worked for WWE, I was proud to be a sports entity. If that's what they want to call it, I was proud to be that. When I worked for New Japan, here's another thing. Is something, right? NXT, for whatever it was, if nobody's figured out that in a Western society that was a lot of it was based on the way we did things. And it took a while to get it all right, but when it was right, from when it was really right, it's based off my experiences of, and not just my experiences. Everything I've told you about. Me and Triple H wanted to take all the carny nonsense out of wrestling as much as possible. Have a great place to train. It was a lot of it was the way I thought, based on my time in New Japan, because you got to the building, you trained. If you went through the dojo, I didn't, but I was sort of an honorary person there. I can go in and eat in the back with all the fellas, because I've been training with them since I was a teenager, and they know that I did my bit when I was there. I used to train with them. I didn't train with the young ones. I would still do the same training as them, but just stood off to the side. So I wouldn't ask anybody, that's, and then I didn't come in and lie down on the, or go to sleep under the tables. I based it on that, because the way I was treated was in New Japan. WWE was incredible, like as well, and WWE going on European tours, going on and overseas tours. Get up. You didn't have the training facility, but get up, go to the gym or do your training, get on the bus, go and wrestle, have a good match, and then go and stay in a nice hotel. That's what I hope people realize one day, that if they ever got to do any of that, that was the best this is ever going to be. And if people, so you've got that training facility with all these people that will help you. Whether you make the most of it or not is up to you. Whether it worked out for you, and it's never going to work out for everybody. That's just the way it is. But a lot of it was, once we started going, outside of Florida with NXT, fly as a team, to be proud to say that, yeah, I train 5 days a week, and yeah, I am a real athlete. I'm not just somebody off the street. I'm a real athlete who trains. Yeah, and I'm proud. I used to be proud to wear I used to be really proud to wear my New Japan stuff. Right? Get on the bus, get to a show, have a good match. No, just go out, whatever your time is, and you get that or that, and then get on the bus and get fed and go back to the hotel. What more do you want? And a lot of it, and that was all from my experiences and Triple H's ideas of changing things or whatever else. But a lot, that was how I always envisioned it to be. And
modeled after your time in
and a lot of it, yeah, and WWE European tours, well, overseas tours, because that was as good as it got. You didn't have to. You got on, stayed in a nice hotel, got on the bus, got fed. I never moaned. You never heard me moaning about being in. People used to moan about being in. I go on tours with WWE. Oh, gotta go on tour, and I'm like, what? You're getting to go to these great countries with a great crowd and get on the. All you got to do is get on the bus. You haven't got to drive yourself now. You got to get on the bus, and you get fed 3 times or as many times a day as you want, and get looked after. Oh, I'm sorry, it's too hard for you. Maybe you want to look in the mirror a little bit. And I don't care who that upsets. If you've got a problem, come and take it up with me. Right? I mean, it's like, I loved all that. So there was things, again, up more to my New Japan stuff. So the door opening straight away with Mr. Inoki. The next thing is, because of the people I know who I knew in England who had been good to me and I'd trained with and knew and I wrestled like. So I got Mr. Fujinami, Mr. Kido, Mr. Fujiwara. You know, he was only on a couple, I think one or two, the first tours I was on, I wanted to.
Well, we're going to talk about a couple of those matches with those fellas. But first, let's talk about something that nobody's whining about, nobody's complaining about, which is athletic greens.
Oh, yes.
Of course, Mr. Regal, you love your athletic greens. Have you gotten your new supply yet? Do we need to talk to somebody about some more athletic greens for Mr. Regal?
We do need to talk about a new supply.
We're gonna take care of it because Mr. Regal loves his athletic greens because you know, of course it gives you energy, it optimizes your immune system, you know, and of course you don't like vegetables, so it kind of sneaks them in there like your mom used to sneak in some vegetables into a you know, whatever it is. I'm not familiar with English food, but whatever it is you got fed, you probably got snuck vegetables into it. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. Adaptogens.
Yes, it does.
This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Of course, you talked about it's very easy to take. You just scoop it in, you mix it up, and it
doesn't have a nasty. Some of those green drinks have a nasty green taste. No, this is a very nice tasting, smooth. It's the business.
And it's lifestyle friendly, you know, so if you eat keto or paleo or vegan, dairy free, gluten free, it works for you. It costs less than $3 a day. It's got 7,000 plus 5-star reviews, and it's a climate neutral certified company, which really has. And
look at this. Look at this. If you're watching this on YouTube,
look at that smile.
Look at the glow.
He's glowing, folks. He's
glowing.
He doesn't even use lighting, and he looks like that. That is a young man. And another thing about them is they donated over 1.2 million meals to kids in 2020. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/regal. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/regal to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Now, Mr. Regal,
yes,
we talked about you touring and going over and wrestling these Japan, fine people being accepted. It's you know, what I have in front of me is your first match being against Kido and Fujinami, and I think in your book you even said you can't recall who your partner was.
That's a shame.
It was Flying Scorpio.
Oh right. Oh wow. So yeah, and that's bad on me because me and Scorpio are good pals, and he's. I mean, he went to the New Japan dojo. People don't know that. People don't know that. You know,
he was ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Oh, fantastic! Go back and watch on the network. If you've got the network, it was that. I just got to America, and there was. I know this might upset people, but there's a match of Chris Benoit and Scorpio, and. Unbelievable. You know, like everybody seems to think a lot of this stuff started, like I've mentioned this before, but like between the three of us, and you know, then you add in a few others. There was stuff going on, and they did it all in that match. You know, they were fob because they both had more than me. I could do my bit, but I didn't have the crazy ability that they had.
You're not getting on the top rope.
Oh, get a nosebleed. No, honestly. No, they all jammed out. It'd start going like a bunny's nose if I was on that top rope. No.
It seems like on this tour, the first tour.
So that was the first night, and I'm like, this is, you know, again, I've told you these names, but I'm a big fan of Mr. Fujinami. I'm a big fan of Kido because I've seen them, and they're the style of pro that I tried to be. And they're the Japanese. That's what's great about watching. Pete wrote that match I told you about before. Watch Pete and Mr. Fujinami, and they're just it's the English and Japanese version of each other, and it's the same with Kido. You know, they're just the exact kind of pro that I set out to be. Although I had to become a character, they were what I wanted to be, and they carried themselves like pros. They are pro. They were pros. They are pros. They're the best. That's everybody's got a different idea of what they do. That's what I wanted to be: a career pro, a trunks and boots wrestler, and all this other wonderful stuff that's come my way as is extra bonus because I loved all the comedy and stuff. But they're the kind of when we was talking about that, like people go, I was just a mid card. No, I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and I achieved that because I could do that style that they did. And if you don't get that, or everything I've had, once I got out the fairground, it was a bonus. Once I got to 20 and I could keep up with these fellas, that's when that was me. If it had all ended after my first Japanese tour, I was happy.
Yeah,
that's how much that meant to me. That first match, in fact, if I'd have never wrestled again after that first match, I would have said I would have had the perfect career, because that was everything. I'd wrestled everybody that I cared to at the time, as far as the style of heavyweight, or even though that Fujinami and Pete wasn't really a heavyweight, but just perfect. The style of wrestling that I wanted to do and that I could do, because I couldn't do the stuff that like the junior heavyweights did, which I wanted to do. I just couldn't. That was the style that I gravitated towards. That was it. You could have ended my career right then, and I'd have been happy. And then the next year, so you're going to throw some things at me now, but so please, like,
well, I was going to say,
the floor is yours.
Yeah, I was going to say, luckily for us, you did wrestle again, and I think it was the very next night or the night after that. It was Chono and Muto, of course, the great Muto, and Masahiro Chono defeated you and Max Moon. Is that Paul Diamond? That
was Paul Diamond.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh dear. Right.
What was it like? What was it like wrestling Muta in his like, that seems to be his prime years. Like,
well, I wrestled Muta quite a bit, and he liked wrestling me. He very much liked wrestling me because he liked the style. Those guys, the Japanese guys, had a big respect for that British European style, and so he would say he just grabbed my wrist and he'd just be go, as I'm doing all those reversals and escapes and trying to get out of stuff and just doing, and he all those fellas did, so.
Mr. Regal, stop me if you've heard this before. Science tells us, I know, we've heard it before, but it doesn't stop being true, that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering core body temperature. You got yourself, Mr. Regal, chilly sleep. You love it. And like I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. My friend Conrad Thompson, who, as you know, does a lot of podcasts, he was one of the first ones, I think, to get a chilly sleep. And he called me once, and we talked for a couple hours about a bunch of different stuff. But he literally did like a 30-minute ad to me about chilly sleep, just selling me on it. And I'm telling you, he is 100% right, because temperature-controlled sleep repairs muscles after a hard day's work and improves cognitive function, so you can always start your day feeling sharp and alert. All that's true. But let me tell you what's really true. A good night's sleep, folks. I used to wake up several times a night, and I didn't realize how much it had to do with, like, when you lay on a bed, it's just you in that bed, and it's creating friction, it's creating temperature, and you can't reduce that temperature by turning the pillow over or rolling over. That's why we do that. But if you have a chilly sleep, it actually controls it. It is now a necessary, vital part of my household. Chilly Sleep makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well-being. Chilly Sleep makes the Uller and Cube sleep systems, which are hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide your ideal sleep temperature. So it's just like it's a mattress topper, but it's this high-tech deal, and it's really great, you know, and it really works, and it's easy. These luxury mattress pads keep your bed at the perfect temperature, and not the perfect temperature, because there's no perfect temperature. There's your perfect temperature, and you might be surprised. Some people like it a little cool, some people like it a little hot, and these sleep systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the energy and confidence to power through your day. Imagine waking up and not feeling tired. That was a dream to me if I even had them before. And now I dream like a mother, and I wake up and I'm not tired. And Chilly Sleep is something that can help make that happen if you're interested in it. I know you should be, because sleep, man, I tell you, we all go full to the mat every single day, and getting that sleep is crucial for success. For an extra layer of comfort, they also make the Chilly Blanket, the only weighted blanket that can also be paired with a control unit for the ultimate sweat-free sleep. So not just below you, but above you. You know, I've always had troubles falling asleep. I have a terrible sleep schedule. And during the summer, I have my best sleep schedule because I have to wake up and teach kids. And, you know, I have to get up like at 6 or whatever, like a normal person, and then be like alert at 8 a.m. And I have to be with them all day long. And having a good night's sleep, it's more important than anything, like literally. And Chilly Sleep has helped get me there. And thank you, Chilly Sleep. And if you want it, and I'm telling you, you should, head over to chillysleep.com/regal to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Gentleman Villain with William Regal listeners, and only for a limited time. That's right, Chilly, CHILI, sleep.com/regal to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. And we cannot thank Chilly Sleep enough, not just for sponsoring the podcast as much as they have, but for a good night's sleep. Check them out. You'll be glad you did. Well, Mr. Regal, we're going to go ahead and close out this episode, but I did want to ask you about another match on this first tour, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a lot more Japan talk in the future. And of course, you've had a lot to say, but
I'm just so our audience know. This isn't your typical podcast, and I've had such a lot happen to me. I want this to be something no different than the wrestling I used to. You've heard me, if you've listened to this, would your wrestling hold up in 30 years? I was always taught that, and it's paid off for me. Well, I've got a lot of what really went on. I'm not full of agenda. I'm not full of ego. I'm not full of nonsense. I was there and I saw it with clear eyes, right? But I want this to be a document for when young wrestlers in whatever, from now or until, if you've got to listen to me tell stories and go on, but that's what Daniel Bryan did. That's what a lot of the people who've been around or know me, there's lessons to be learned in this. Some of it good, some of it bad, and some funny stories and some interesting things, but also a perspective of how to navigate this job for as long as I have, and outright saying that I didn't have anything special about me to get in it, apart from luckily growing to 6'3".
But there's a lot about how you conducted yourself as well,
right? And
like
and times when I conducted myself appallingly, and we've gone through that, and that was a short period. But for the majority of it, I want you to have this, because it's getting less and less, and there's less people going to be able to do this, because they're not going to live the lives that I've had, because the job is dictated differently now because of TV and because of no territories left, and the things are different. So I just want you, whether you listen to, this might not come into play for a lot of people for the next 20, 30 years, one day somebody might take all the best bits of this or the bits of advice and stick it together sometime, and hopefully it will give somebody a guiding whatever to get through this.
You know, from what I've heard, I think it's doing that for some people already, if I'm being honest with you. And if I'm being honest with you as well, this has been a great episode. We're going to talk a lot more about Japan, but I do want to talk about, you know, on this tour and in your next match, there's a couple, once or twice you opposed them, but you usually tagged with them. I'm sure they were a big hit in Japan. They seem to have, you know, that big American bruiser, you know, Brody / Terry Gordy / Stan Hansen bruising style. The Nasty Boys did the tour with you. What was it like hanging out with those two fellas?
I had a great, that tour was so incredible. That 10 days, that first 10 days, well, they were there for 2 weeks. So, right. You mentioned Max Moon, and he was my partner. Now, that Max Moon at that point was Paul Diamond. Again, that was the only time I was around Paul Diamond, and I got on very well with him for the 10 days. Not my story to tell, but I don't know what it was. They didn't like him. Somebody else will have that story, but I'm not going to tell it. I do know a version of it, but it's none of my business. But for whatever reason, they decided not that they didn't like him. So he'd been, Max Moon originally was Conan, and then it was passed on to Paul Diamond.
Right.
This is just the end of the, there's a couple of things that they've noted here, but Max Moon character had a mask, and then he had these big things that went on his arms that shot like ribbons and things, I think, out of them.
Tassels, right?
Tassel, was it?
Tassels,
yeah. But they actually had these things that fit on his arm.
Right.
And it came in a big crate with a, you know, like when the microphones and stuff, the sponge stuff, when you create music stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So a big music crate,
like
because it had these big things that fit on his arms and like whatever it was. I would imagine Leon had one for his Vader mask and that, you know, it was just, but this Max Moon thing, they were doing it in New Japan. Right. They see these big things. Well, so they shot.
I'm sorry. Steve Coffin just flashed the picture, and I wasn't familiar with the giant foam.
Oh, right.
That he wore.
Right. Yeah.
That poor guy.
Right. Well, but again, everybody's got their own story. Unless you do anything to me, I get on with everybody. I've learned in my life, if I wasn't to talk to people who did something that I didn't like, I'd never talk to anybody. Does that make sense?
That's a lesson for us all, including myself.
Right.
Sure.
We all have to just get, you know, okay, well, unless it's something really, I'd never talk to anybody. I've got no politics. I keep out of politics. It's not that I have different views on everything, but I keep out of it. No religion, no anything to get into arguments with. People do things. I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. You know, people can get self-righteous, but something had happened with Paul Diamond, and the Nasty Boys had got the ump. When I say the ump, it's an English saying, mean got the, and I'm going to use another English saying, got the needle, which means just not happy with somebody. If you hear me ever say got the ump or got the needle, means they're not happy with somebody, right? Well, at the end of this, the last day of this tour, the Max Moon box comes out, and the Nasty Boys sent out a couple of the young Japanese young boys, the New Japan young boys, to the fish market to get the largest, biggest, horriblest fish that they could possibly find. And these things were great big, I don't know what kind of fish they were, but huge, big things with the eyes still, the lips still on, and straight from the fish market. So on the very last night, he's took off the armbands. He's done it. They've got the box, pulled the foam out, stuffed these fish inside it, right? And then the young boys have put the armbands in, and they've closed the crate. This crate, Paul Diamond lived in Tampa. It's just gone on the plane, and this is just theatre of the mind to me now. But I would imagine he's gone on from Japan, and because Japan was a grueling thing, for a few weeks, it was a grueling, because he worked hard there. Let's put it that way. And I just imagine, God knows what happened, but one day he's going to be in his garage, as you Americans say, garage, as I say. He's in he's going to gone in there, and surely, right, two big rotting fish in this thing, and he's going to have had to open this. And I've never seen him since, so I don't know what happened, but I can't imagine this being like a pleasant state. That this big crate is sat in his garage in Tampa in this was in the summer when we were there. You've probably got the dates there. It was what August or something or whatever.
June.
Right. Well, don't matter. It's Tampa and it's hot.
Right.
So he's got this thing sat in his garage, even if it's only for a day. But he's probably not going to open it up again. He's not doing, because he wasn't doing Max Moon all the time. So God knows what happens when he finally opened that up. And I've never seen him since to find out or heard about it. But that was the kind of thing that was going on. So here's the other story. Have I told you the 4th of July story with Nobs, with the toga party yet?
I do not think so.
Okay.
Oh, wait. You did. You said you didn't know what a toga was.
Right.
Right.
So I've already told you this, but
yeah.
Let's tell it again. Let's finish on this. We had the night off on the 4th of July. Excuse me. We have in my house now not only the lizards and another lizard coming this week. Now we've got a male Maine Coon cat. It grows to 30 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a kitten. And my wife's going, doesn't realize that this thing's a puma, basically. And it's going to have me off. I know it's going to have me off.
It's going to take care of her problem.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's going to do me in. I know what she's up to. Right. One day I'll be falling asleep, and she'll cover me in probably a wet fish or something. This thing's going to kill me. Anyway, neither in it. I was just shutting the door in case it come in and jumped on me.
Yeah, don't need a puma attack during the podcast.
Right. So it's Sags' birthday, the 4th of July. So we've had this toga party. I've told this story before, but at one point they both decided to attack me, and that didn't go well for them. So I've put them both to sleep. Did I tell you the story about when worlds collide?
I don't think you did.
Okay. So this is and if I haven't, it's worth telling again. So we're having this toga party on the top floor of this not very big hotel, because once you get outside of the big cities, they're not that big, and the rooms are very tiny and very little beds. And it's like a warrant of we're just all going in and out of each other's rooms. We're on the roof. They've sent out, Nasty Boys have sent out for fireworks because it's 4th of July. We're shooting fireworks off the top. We're having a good time. Let's put it that way. It's 24-hour party, people, right? We're having a good time, right? Then the police come and say, you've got to go. You can't be on the roof firing fireworks off. So I'm just in one of the rooms with it. Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr were there. And first time I'd met Eddie and Art. This is 94. they were going back to do When Worlds Collide in a short period of time. I'm not sure the exact time. You'd have to look that up, but they were going back to do that. This before they did that, which was I know Mike Tenay did the announcing on that incredible job, and I remember watching that match in Brian Pillman's apartment with Triple H. It's funny things you remember, and Marc Mero actually was there as well. Funny things you remember. As WCW co-promoted it, but so I'm just sat in one of the rooms with Eddie, I think, talking, and next thing I can hear the Nasty Boys are letting off bottle rockets down the hallway and hitting the elevator at the end. So there's big explosions going on. So the manager's up again with the police. So finally got that calmed down. The whole trip before that, whatever it was, you'd have to look at the dates. It might have only been a few days. It might have been a week. I don't know. I got on good with Art Barr when I met him. And unfortunately, he passed away not too long after. But every week from then on, he'd call me whenever he knew I was off, or he was in Mexico, but he used to fly back to Portland and that. And then unfortunately, he wasn't there one day, but I got on really well with Eddie and Art that week. But Art was bragging a lot about how much money that they were going to make for this. They did it on the Worlds Collide match. They did a hair versus mask match, right? Excuse me, why I just wet my whistle a little.
No problem at all.
Just
that's what we get for having such long podcasts, you know.
Yeah. So, but so it's also salt and potassium and magnesium, which is so. He was, let's just say, it wasn't a bragging, but he was going on a little bit. And around the Nasty Boys, there's, they are what they are, right? And I think the world of both of them, and they can be a right pain in the backside 1 minute, but I had more fun with them, as much fun with them as I have with most people, with the exception of Dave Taylor and Dave Taylor, Terry Rudge, and Robbie Brookside. I've had a lot of fun with the Nasty Boys. And on this particular 4th of July night, I ended up going to bed. What I didn't know was the Nasty Boys had been dropping a lot of things in Art Barr's drinks. Let's put it that way. And he'd fell asleep. I wake up the next morning to bang, 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 bang. I mean, sounding like World War III's kicking off. I go out into the hallway, and it's a tiny hallway. So I just open this tiny door. Eddie Guerrero, my great friend, and as far as I'm concerned, the best all-round wrestler of all time. That's my opinion.
Hard to argue with that.
Once he, as far as being not a wrestler, but the everything. Once he figured out the talking, the best of them all. That's in my opinion, right? And I don't care what anybody said. There was everything about him was great. So Eddie is trying to kick, and I don't know if it was Knobs or Sags' door, because I'm just, whoa, what's going on? And he's got a huge butcher's knife. He'd gone down to the kitchen and got a knife. Now I've got no idea what's going on, so I've just run out and took the knife off Eddie. I've just ducked Eddie's arm, got him down, and said, Eddie, whatever it is, it's not worth it. Got the knife off him, threw it up the other end of the thing, calmed him down, got him in his room, got showered, got him. So I go and get on the bus. Now, when you go in the Japanese way of it used to be anyway, once you got your seat on your bus, that was your seat for the rest of the tour.
So choose wisely.
Choose wisely, yeah. And I had a nice seat, but right across from me, not right across, but then the one on the other side in front of me was Art Barr. And I climb on the bus, and I don't know what's like. I still don't know what's happening, but I've got Eddie calmed down, and there's no sign of Art Barr. The Nasty Boys are already on the bus, and they're laughing their heads off hysterically. And I walk past Art Barr's seat, and I see a carrier bag, like a plastic bag, with a pile of hair and a $5 bill on top of it. What they've done is cut and chunks and most of his hair off and shaved his eyebrows off and stuck it, because he was bragging. And I'll say the figure. I don't know if this is true or not, but he said they were guaranteed $17,000. I actually asked Vicky Guerrero recently, and she said that wasn't the case at all. So
there's a lesson there.
There's a lesson there, yeah. Don't brag about it. And there's a lesson and there's another. This is a serious lesson. Wrestlers, when you come in the wrestling job, whether you want to listen to me or not, this used to be an old thing. You make your own deals, but don't talk money with people, because it causes problems. But you have to make your own deal, and then you have to be happy with it. If you want any more of that, I can expand on that in other, but I've seen so much trouble over that over the years. Make your own deal, but you've got to make your own deal and be satisfied with that. But don't go talking about how much money you're making with people, because it's just not the thing to do. It's a lost thing in wrestling now, and people talk to each other and tell each other about, that's your business. Keep it your business and between you and the person you're working for, because it creates animosity, and you don't. The less of that I can try and save you, the better. You don't need that, right? So anyway, so there's this money. So eventually Art Barr gets on, and he's got this cap on and no eyebrows. Well, they're just laughing, and I'm trying not to, because I feel bad for the fella. So if you ever see that Worlds Collide pay-per-view when he gets his head shaved, there's very little of his real hair.
There's very little left.
Very little left. It was all, he had to go back however long it was, either grew what he could in the time, or have hair extensions on. What you're seeing getting shaved off is not, and again, there's people who know that the months and the time difference, but it wasn't too far after, because they were talking about it on this tour non-stop. Well, Art was talking about it. Eddie wasn't. Eddie wasn't saying anything. Eddie was being just great Eddie, and me and Eddie, me and him got on really well. We bonded a great friendship there. Me and Art got on, but he did have this thing about bragging. And so, yes, I'll end on that. So if you see that, because that's a famous, well, pretty infamous, it was in the old days. Again, it's in the 30 years ago, isn't it? Like, so, but that was like a big pay-per-view. And a lot of people
still
talk about that. And
as one of the greatest of all time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but Art Barr's hair isn't Art Barr's hair on that when it's getting cut at the end. There's very, very little of it, because it was left on a seat bus in Japan.
Well, if you guys get a chance to watch that. If you get a chance to subscribe, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to, give us a review over on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Special thanks for this episode. Steve Kaufman does all the video.
Thanks, Steve.
So much else. Wesley Burleson, of course, who does our audio. Dominic D'Angelo does our social. And I'm always going to forget somebody. Everybody involved with ad-free shows. And we just like to thank everybody. Oh, of course, Derek, who does our research. And we
Yes.
will see you next time on the Gentleman Villain Podcast.
Thank you very much, everyone who works on this. And thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you.
We'll see you next week.